The champagne flute slipped from my grasp, not quite shattering, but clattering against the polished marble bar with a sound that seemed to echo the sudden, sharp crack in my carefully constructed world. It was Julian's annual charity gala, a shimmering spectacle of his making, and he was across the room, bathed in the soft glow of a dozen spotlights, laughing with an ease that had once captivated me, now chilling me to the bone. His hand, the one that had traced constellations on my back countless nights, was resting casually on the small of a blonde woman's back, a woman I'd never seen before, yet whose presence felt as deeply ingrained in the fabric of this night as the silk of my dress. My breath hitched, a cold knot tightening in my stomach as the orchestra swelled, ironically playing a saccharine love song. I felt the heat of 1,000 eyes, though I knew none were truly on me, yet the humiliation was already a physical weight, pressing down, making my vision swim. Every whispered compliment, every shared dream, every promise Julian had ever made to me, seemed to curdle in the opulent air. The scent of lilies, usually so intoxicating, now felt cloying, suffocating. My mind, usually a chaotic but vibrant space, went utterly blank, then flooded with 1,000 tiny, disjointed memories, each one a shard of glass reflecting a different angle of Julian's perfect, impenetrable facade. I remembered the first time he'd told me he loved me, whispering it against my hair as we watched the city lights blur below us from his penthouse balcony, the cool night air a stark contrast to the warmth of his embrace. It had felt like coming home, a profound sense of belonging I hadn't known I was missing. He'd painted a future for us then, a vivid tapestry woven with shared ambitions, quiet evenings, and grand adventures. He was a whirlwind, a force of nature in a tailored suit, his ideas as boundless as his charm. He spoke of investments, of groundbreaking tech ventures, of a future where we'd build something meaningful together, something that would leave a mark. I, a graphic designer who found solace in the precise lines of a vector image and the nuanced interplay of color, had been swept up in his grand vision. He made my world feel bigger, brighter, more significant. He'd call me his muse, his anchor, his everything. And I, utterly, irrevocably, foolishly, believed him. The woman's hand, perfectly manicured, reached up to adjust Julian's tie, a gesture so intimate, so proprietorial, that it ripped through the last vestiges of my denial. My fingers, still trembling from the near drop of the glass, curled into fists, nails digging into my palms. The pain was a welcome anchor, something real in a moment that felt surreal, like a scene from a movie I was unwillingly cast in. I wanted to scream, to shatter the illusion, to demand answers, but my throat was a desert. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the Julian I knew, the man who left me handwritten notes on my pillow, who remembered my favorite obscure coffee order, who'd spent hours helping me perfect a tricky client presentation, with this stranger, this actor on a stage I hadn't known existed. Was this what it felt like to be completely, utterly blindsided? The betrayal wasn't just a feeling, it was a physical sensation, a cold, spreading numbness that started in my chest and radiated outwards, chilling my limbs, making my teeth ache. I remembered the elaborate charade he'd pulled off just last week when my parents had visited. He'd been the perfect host, charming my father with his discussions of global markets, captivating my mother with tales of his philanthropic endeavors. He'd even cooked my grandmother's famous lasagna recipe, a dish I'd only ever managed to botch, and presented it with a flourish, making my mother tear up with joy. "He's a keeper, Alara," she'd whispered to me later, her eyes shining with approval. A keeper. The word now tasted like ash. How many times had he performed this act? How many people had he charmed, manipulated, lied to? Was I just another audience member in his elaborate, ongoing play? The thought was a venomous bite, leaving a bitter aftertaste. I felt a sudden, desperate urge to escape, to run from the glittering crowd, from the suffocating scent of lilies, from the man who had just ripped the rug out from under my feet without even looking my way. But my feet felt rooted to the spot, heavy, as if made of lead. My gaze was fixed on them, on Julian and the blonde woman, a morbid fascination holding me captive. The blonde woman leaned in, whispering something in Julian's ear, and he threw his head back, a booming laugh escaping him, a sound that usually filled me with warmth, now filled me with dread. It was the laugh of a man without a care in the world, a man who had everything, including a meticulously crafted lie. And I was standing here, in the wreckage of that lie, feeling utterly, irrevocably foolish. The music swelled again, a crescendo of violins, mocking my internal cacophony. I needed air. I needed to disappear. But first, I needed to know. I needed to see his eyes, to catch a glimpse of the truth behind the performance. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The room, once a symbol of his success and our shared future, now felt like a gilded prison. The air in the grand ballroom was thick with the scent of expensive perfumes, the murmur of polite conversation, and the clinking of glasses, a symphony of superficiality that suddenly grated on my nerves. My own perfume, a light citrus scent Julian had picked out for me, now felt like a costume, a part of the role I'd been unwittingly playing. I could feel the faint tremor in my hands, a subtle shiver that ran down my spine despite the warmth of the room. It was a premonition, a cold dread that had been lurking in the periphery of my consciousness for weeks, maybe even months, but which I had stubbornly, perhaps foolishly, ignored. Julian had always been a master of deflection, of charming away any nascent doubts with a well-timed compliment, a grand gesture, or a passionate kiss that left me breathless and disarmed. He had a way of making me feel like I was the only person who truly understood him, the only one who saw beneath his polished exterior to the sensitive, ambitious man he claimed to be. And I had clung to that belief, cherished it, even when small, unsettling details began to surface. Like the time he'd cancelled our anniversary dinner at the last minute, citing an urgent, unavoidable business meeting in another city, a meeting that, according to his assistant, had been scheduled weeks in advance. He'd apologized profusely, brought me a ridiculously expensive watch, and promised to make it up to me with a weekend getaway to the coast. I'd accepted, of course, mollified by his charm and the genuine-looking regret in his eyes. Now, looking at him across the room, his arm still casually draped around the blonde woman, I wondered if that business meeting had been with her. The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. My gaze darted around, searching for a familiar face, a friendly anchor in this sea of strangers and half-truths. Chloe, my best friend, was supposed to be here, but I hadn't seen her yet. She would know what to do. She would see the truth, cut through the noise, and tell me I wasn't crazy. Chloe had always been the pragmatic one, the one who saw through facades, who questioned things I blindly accepted. She'd voiced concerns about Julian before, subtle ones, disguised as playful jabs or gentle warnings. "He's a bit too perfect, isn't he, Ilara?" she'd said once, a wry smile playing on her lips. Like a character from a rom-com, but with better tailoring. I'd laughed it off then, attributing her skepticism to her own past heartbreaks. Now, her words echoed in my mind, a chilling prophecy. The blonde woman turned her head slightly, her profile catching the light, delicate features, a sharp jawline, and a confident, almost proprietorial smile as she looked up at Julian. She was beautiful, undeniably so, in a way that made me feel suddenly plain, insignificant. Was this the woman he'd been spending those late nights with, the ones he'd attributed to urgent calls and crunch time at work? The nights he'd come home smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine. A scent he'd dismissively blamed on a colleague or a client? The pieces were beginning to click into place, forming a mosaic of deceit that was far more intricate and devastating than I could have ever imagined. My chest felt tight, as if an invisible hand was squeezing the air from my lungs. I needed to get out of here, but my legs still refused to cooperate. My eyes, however, were still fixed on Julian, on the way he touched her, on the way he smiled at her. It was the same smile he gave me, the same touch, the same effortless charm. And that was the most terrifying realization of all. It was all an act, a performance he could effortlessly replicate for anyone. A waiter, oblivious to my internal turmoil, approached with a tray of exquisite canapés, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the monochrome landscape of my emotions. I shook my head, my throat too constricted to speak. The thought of food made my stomach churn. I needed to move, to breathe, to escape this suffocating charade. My eyes scanned the room again, desperately searching for Chloe, for an exit, for anything that wasn't Julian and his new, public display of affection. The sheer audacity of it, to bring her here, to his gala, where I was supposed to be his partner, his date, his fiancé, was a slap in the face. My left hand, the one with the delicate sapphire engagement ring he'd given me just 6 months ago, felt suddenly heavy, a mocking symbol of a future that was now crumbling before my eyes. He proposed on a moonlit beach in Bali, the waves whispering secrets as he knelt, his voice thick with emotion, telling me I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. I'd cried, of course, tears of pure joy and overwhelming love. Now, those tears felt like a cruel joke. Was that entire trip a lie too? Was she there, somewhere in the background, a shadow lurking just out of sight? The questions cascaded through my mind, each one a fresh wound. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck, a combination of anger and profound embarrassment. How many people in this room knew? How many of Julian's associates, his friends, his family, were privy to this secret life? Had they been silently judging me, pitying me, all this time? The thought was unbearable. I felt a sudden, desperate need to confront him, to tear down his perfect facade right here, right now, in front of everyone. To scream the truth, to expose him for the fraud he was. But the rational part of my brain, the part that hadn't completely succumbed to the emotional onslaught, held me back. What would that achieve? More humiliation for me, a dramatic scene that he would inevitably twist and turn to his advantage, painting me as the hysterical, jealous ex-no. I needed to be strategic. I needed to understand the full extent of his deception before I made a move. I needed evidence, undeniable proof that would shatter his carefully constructed world, just as he had shattered mine. My gaze hardened, a cold resolve settling over me. The pain was still there, a raw, throbbing ache, but beneath it, a flicker of something new ignited, a fierce, protective anger that demanded answers, demanded justice. I would not be a passive victim. I would not let him get away with this. The blonde woman laughed, a bright, tinkling sound that cut through the orchestral music, and Julian leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. It was a gesture of such casual intimacy that it felt like a physical blow. My breath hitched again, but this time, it wasn't from shock or pain. It was from a quiet, simmering rage. The game had changed. And I was about to play. The air, once thick with the cloying scent of lilies and expensive perfume, now felt thin, almost brittle, as if the very atmosphere of the room was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable crack. My eyes, still locked onto Julian and the blonde woman, felt dry and hot, despite the burning sensation behind them. Every cell in my body thrummed with a strange, unnatural energy, a terrifying cocktail of adrenaline, shock, and a nascent, dangerous anger. It was as if a switch had been flipped, transforming me from the naive, trusting Alara into someone sharper, colder, more observant. The details, which I had previously dismissed as insignificant, now stood out in stark relief. The way Julian would often check his phone under the table during dinners, a quick, furtive glance he'd explain away as client emails. The sudden, unexplained trips he'd take, always last minute, always urgent, always with a vague explanation that I, in my trusting ignorance, had accepted without question. The subtle shifts in his demeanor, the way his eyes would sometimes dart away when I asked about his day, the faint tension in his jaw that I'd attributed to stress from his high-pressure job. All of it, every single tiny detail, now coalesced into a horrifying, undeniable pattern. He hadn't just lied to me, he had built an entire alternative reality, a parallel universe where he was a different man, living a different life, with a different woman. And I, in my blissful ignorance, had been living in a carefully curated illusion. The thought made me want to laugh hysterically, a dark, bitter sound that would undoubtedly draw attention. But I couldn't. My throat was still too tight, my jaw clenched so hard it ached. My gaze drifted from Julian to the woman, attempting to imprint every detail of her appearance into my memory. Her dress, a shimmering emerald green, hugged her curves in a way that screamed confidence, a stark contrast to my own elegant but subdued navy gown. Her hair, a cascade of perfectly styled blonde waves, seemed to catch every errant ray of light, framing a face that was undeniably beautiful, with high cheekbones and full, red lips. She was everything I wasn't, or at least, everything I hadn't tried to be. I was the quiet creative, the one who preferred comfortable sweaters and late nights with my design software, the one who found beauty in simplicity. Julian had always said he loved that about me, that I was real, uncomplicated, a refreshing change from the superficiality of his business world. Another lie. Another carefully crafted narrative designed to keep me complacent, to make me feel special while he pursued something entirely different. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to vomit, the rich food I'd barely touched earlier threatening to make an unwelcome reappearance. The air felt heavy, suffocating, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room, leaving me gasping for breath. I needed to get out, to find a quiet corner, to process this seismic shift in my reality. My eyes darted towards the exit, a pair of ornate double doors at the far end of the ballroom. It seemed miles away, an insurmountable distance. My legs still felt like lead, but a new, desperate energy surged through me. I had to move. I had to escape this public spectacle of my own humiliation. Just as I began to gather my resolve, to force my leaden feet into motion, a familiar voice cut through the cacophony of the room, a lifeline in the swirling chaos. "Elara! There you are! I thought I'd never find you in this crowd." It was Chloe, her voice a beacon of normalcy, of genuine affection. She was weaving through the throng, a bright smile on her face, her red dress a vibrant splash of color against the muted tones of the other guests. For a fleeting second, a wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. Then, the shame returned, swift and sharp. How could I tell her? How could I articulate the gut-wrenching betrayal I had just witnessed? How could I explain that the man she'd always been slightly wary of, the man I'd fiercely defended, was a complete and utter fraud? The words felt too big, too devastating to utter aloud. I forced a smile, a brittle, fragile thing that felt like it might shatter at any moment. "Chloe," I managed, my voice a strained whisper. She reached me, her eyes sparkling, and pulled me into a warm hug. Her scent, a familiar mix of vanilla and something uniquely her own, was grounding. "You look stunning," she said, pulling back slightly, her gaze sweeping over my dress. "But you also look like you've seen a ghost. Everything all right?" Her eyes, sharp and perceptive as always, narrowed slightly as they scanned my face, picking up on the subtle tremor in my hands. The forced smile, the haunted look I knew must be etched there. I opened my mouth to speak, to confess everything, to let the dam burst, but the words caught in my throat. My gaze flickered back to Julian, who was now looking directly at me, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly as he registered Chloe's presence, and then, perhaps, the raw pain in my own eyes. For a split second, a flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. Was it surprise? Fear? Annoyance? Then, the mask snapped back into place, and he offered me a practiced, charming smile, the kind he reserved for important clients or distant relatives. He even gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, as if acknowledging my presence, as if everything was perfectly normal. The sheer audacity of it, the cold, calculated performance, sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. He was still playing the part, even now. And that solidified my resolve. I would not let him win. Not like this. Just, a little overwhelmed, I managed to Chloe, forcing a weak laugh that sounded hollow even to my own ears. "It's quite the crowd tonight." Chloe's brow furrowed, her gaze still fixed on my face, clearly unconvinced. She knew me too well. We'd been inseparable since college, navigating everything from disastrous first dates to career crises with a shared supply of bad takeout and even worse advice. She could read my moods like an open book, and right now, my book was screaming catastrophe. She glanced over my shoulder, her eyes doing a quick sweep of the room, and then, predictably, landed on Julian. And then, just as predictably, on the blonde woman beside him. I watched her expression shift, a slow dawning of understanding, a tightening around her mouth that I knew meant trouble. Chloe was fiercely protective, and her protective instincts, combined with her innate skepticism of Julian, were a dangerous combination for him. Her eyes narrowed further, a silent question passing between us. I didn't need to say anything, she saw it. The subtle intimacy of their posture, the way Julian's hand lingered on the woman's back, the easy familiarity between them. It was all there, laid bare for anyone with eyes to see. And Chloe, bless her, had eyes that saw everything. Her gaze flickered back to me, a silent, furious question burning in their depths. I could see the gears turning in her mind, connecting the dots, remembering her earlier warnings, my fervent defenses, and now, this undeniable truth. A slow, almost imperceptible shake of her head, a silent condemnation of Julian, and a profound, empathetic understanding for me. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated connection, a silent acknowledgement of the devastation that had just unfolded. And in that moment, despite the crushing weight of betrayal, I felt a flicker of hope. I wasn't alone. I had Chloe. And together, we would figure this out. The orchestra played on, oblivious, its soaring melody a cruel counterpoint to the silent drama unfolding between us. The air still felt thick, but now, instead of suffocation, there was a strange sense of clarity, a sharp focus born of pain and anger. The first step was taken. The unraveling had begun. The first few weeks after that gala were a blur of numb disbelief and a chilling, methodical detachment. Chloe, bless her heart, had whisked me away from the party that night, her arm a steadying force around my waist as we navigated the throng of oblivious guests. I remember the cool night air hitting my face as we stepped outside, a blessed relief after the suffocating heat of the ballroom. I remember the silence in her car, broken only by the hum of the engine and the frantic pounding of my own heart. And then, the dam had broken. The tears came, hot and furious, a torrent of grief and rage and humiliation that I couldn't control. I sobbed into her shoulder, my voice hoarse, recounting the scene, the blonde woman, Julian's casual betrayal. Chloe just held me, stroking my hair, murmuring comforting words, letting me unravel. She didn't say, "I told you so," though she had every right to. She just listened, her presence a solid anchor in the storm. The next morning, the hangover was twofold. A dull ache behind my eyes from the champagne I'd barely touched, and a far more debilitating emotional one. The reality of it all crashed down with the morning light. Julian. The blonde. The lie. It wasn't a nightmare, it was my life. I felt hollowed out, as if someone had scooped out my insides and left me an empty shell. My apartment, the one Julian and I had so carefully decorated together, now felt alien, every object a painful reminder of a shared future that was now irrevocably shattered. The framed photo of us on our Bali trip, his favorite coffee mug on the counter, the blanket we always shared on movie nights, each one a tiny dagger twisting in the wound. I couldn't bring myself to touch anything, to even look at them. Chloe, ever practical, had taken charge. She'd made me tea, forced me to eat a piece of toast, and then, gently but firmly, started asking questions. Not accusatory questions, but probing ones, designed to help me piece together the timeline of Julian's deception. When did he start working late more often? She'd asked, her voice soft. Did he ever mention this woman, even casually? Her questions, though painful, were a lifeline, pulling me out of the abyss of self-pity and into the realm of cold, hard facts. As I spoke, the memories, once disjointed and confusing, began to align, forming a clearer, more horrifying picture. The urgent business trips that coincided with weekends, the increasingly vague explanations for his whereabouts, the subtle shifts in his phone habits, always on silent, always face down, always a quick, almost imperceptible flinch if I got too close when he was texting. I remembered the time I'd found a single, long blonde hair on his jacket, a hair that clearly wasn't mine. He'd laughed it off, attributing it to a hug from a client's wife at a networking event. I'd believed him, of course, because I wanted to. Because the alternative was too painful to contemplate. The gaslighting, which had been subtle at first, had escalated over the past few months. He'd deny conversations we'd had, twist my words, make me feel like I was imagining things, that my memory was faulty, that I was too sensitive or overthinking everything. "You're just stressed, my love," he'd say, his voice dripping with concern, stroking my hair, making me feel guilty for even questioning him. "We're building something big here, and it's a lot of pressure. Don't let your imagination run wild." And I, desperate to believe him, desperate to maintain the perfect facade of our relationship, would apologize, would blame myself, would try harder to be the supportive partner he claimed he needed. The psychological toll of this constant manipulation had been immense. I'd started to doubt my own sanity, my own perceptions. I'd become anxious, withdrawn, constantly walking on eggshells, terrified of upsetting him, of triggering one of his dismissive, gaslighting episodes. My work, usually a source of joy and creative fulfillment, had suffered. I found myself staring blankly at my screen, unable to focus, my mind a tangled mess of doubts and anxieties. Chloe listened patiently, her expression growing grimmer with each revelation. When I finished, the silence in the room was heavy, punctuated only by the distant hum of city traffic. "Alara," she said finally, her voice firm, "this isn't just about another woman. This is about a pattern of deep, calculated deception. He's been manipulating you, gaslighting you, making you doubt yourself. This isn't your fault. He's a master manipulator." Her words, though harsh, were a balm. They validated my feelings, confirmed my suspicions, and, most importantly, absolved me of the self-blame I'd been carrying. "We need to find out who she is," Chloe continued, her eyes glinting with a steely determination. "And we need to figure out what else he's been hiding. Because I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg." And so, the investigation began. It started subtly, with Chloe and me poring over social media, cross-referencing Julian's public profiles with any faint clues I could recall. We looked at the guest list from the gala, though it was long and anonymous. We scrolled through old photos, searching for any familiar faces in the background. It felt like a bizarre, morbid scavenger hunt, each discovery a fresh stab to the heart, but also a step closer to the truth. The first breakthrough came from a seemingly innocuous detail. I remembered Julian mentioning, months ago, a new business partner he was excited about, someone named Anastasia. He'd said she was brilliant, a real go-getter, but had quickly changed the subject when I'd asked for more details. Now, the name Anastasia echoed in my mind. Could it be her? Chloe, with her uncanny ability to find information online, started digging. She searched for Anastasia and Julian in combination with his company name, his industry, even his hobbies. It felt like a long shot, a desperate attempt to grasp at straws. But then, late one night, a text message from Chloe buzzed on my phone, making me jump. It was a link to a LinkedIn profile. The profile picture was a professional headshot of a beautiful blonde woman. Anastasia Petrova. My heart plummeted. It was her. The woman from the gala. My breath hitched, a cold wave washing over me. The profile listed her as the head of investor relations at a small, relatively unknown venture capital firm, a firm Julian had never once mentioned. My hands trembled as I scrolled further, my eyes scanning the details. Her experience, her education, her endorsements. All perfectly legitimate, all perfectly normal. Except for one chilling detail, a shared connection. A mutual connection with Julian on LinkedIn. It wasn't definitive proof of a romantic relationship, but it was enough to confirm their professional entanglement, and the fact that Julian had deliberately kept her existence a secret from me. The lie was getting bigger, more complex. And I knew, with a sickening certainty, that this was just the beginning. The unraveling was gaining momentum, and I was being dragged along with it, whether I liked it or not. The LinkedIn profile of Anastasia Petrova stared back at me from my phone screen, a cold, digital confirmation of the woman who had shattered my world. Head of Investor Relations. A venture capital firm I'd never heard of. And a mutual connection with Julian. My fingers, still trembling, zoomed in on her profile picture. It was undeniably her. The same sharp jawline, the same confident gaze, the same cascade of blonde hair. The professional veneer of the photo couldn't hide the intimate gesture I'd witnessed at the gala, the way her hand had rested on Julian's back, the proprietary adjustment of his tie. It was a chilling juxtaposition, the public persona of a successful businesswoman against the private reality of a hidden affair. My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. Julian had always been vague about his financial dealings, dismissing my questions with a wave of his hand and a charming smile. "It's all very complex, darling," he'd say, "but trust me, it's going to pay off big time. Just a few more months, a few more deals, and we'll be set for life." He'd spoken of a large, impending investment, a game changer that would solidify his position in the tech world and allow us to finally buy that little cottage by the lake we'd dreamed of. He'd even shown me mock-ups of the cottage, complete with a small studio for my design work. It had all felt so real, so tangible. Now, I wondered if Anastasia was involved in this game changer. Was she the key to his grand financial scheme? Or was she just another pawn in his elaborate game of deceit? The questions swirled in my head, each one more unsettling than the last. Chloe, ever the strategist, suggested we look for any public appearances or articles featuring Anastasia. If she's head of investor relations, she's probably at conferences, speaking engagements, things like that, Chloe reasoned, her voice calm and methodical, a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. We spent hours sifting through online news archives, industry publications, and event listings. It was tedious, painstaking work, but the adrenaline of discovery kept me going. And then, we found it. A small article in an obscure online business journal, dated 3 months prior, featuring a panel discussion on emerging markets. The panel included Julian Thorne, CEO of Thorne Innovations, a company I knew he owned, but whose operations were always shrouded in secrecy, and Anastasia Petrova, head of investor relations at Sterling Capital. The article included a photo of the panelists. Julian and Anastasia were seated next to each other, both smiling, both looking perfectly at ease. The caption beneath the photo read, "Thorne and Petrova discuss their collaborative efforts in securing new investment opportunities." Collaborative efforts. The words echoed in my mind, taking on a sinister new meaning. It wasn't just a professional connection, it was a deep, ongoing collaboration. And it had been going on for at least 3 months, possibly longer. My stomach clenched. 3 months ago, Julian and I had been planning our summer vacation, discussing wedding venues, talking about starting a family. All while he was collaborating with Anastasia. The sheer audacity of his double life was breathtaking. The article also mentioned a major investment summit coming up in 2 weeks, where both Julian and Anastasia were scheduled to speak on a joint panel, presenting their innovative new investment model. 2 weeks. The same summit Julian had told me he was attending alone, a solo networking opportunity that would be too boring for me. Another lie. Another layer of deception peeled back, revealing the rot beneath. The discovery of the article, and the impending joint appearance, ignited a new kind of resolve within me. The initial shock and grief began to recede, replaced by a cold, burning anger. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was furious. Furious at Julian for his betrayal, furious at myself for my naivety, and furious at the elaborate web of lies he had woven around me. I wanted to confront him, to scream at him, to demand answers, but Chloe held me back. "Not yet," she advised, her voice firm. "He'll just gaslight you again, Alara. He'll twist it, deny it, make you feel crazy. We need more. We need undeniable proof that he can't talk his way out of." She was right. I knew Julian's manipulative tactics all too well. He was a master of psychological warfare, capable of turning any accusation back on the accuser, making them doubt their own sanity. I needed a smoking gun, something that would leave him no room for denial. We started focusing on the financial aspect. Julian's company, Thorne Innovations, had always been a bit of a mystery to me. He claimed it was on the cusp of a major breakthrough, but I'd never seen any tangible results, no big product launches, no significant news. He'd always brushed off my questions about the specifics, saying it was proprietary information or still under wraps. Now, I wondered if Thorne Innovations was nothing more than a shell company, a front for something far more illicit. Chloe, with her background in journalism research, suggested looking into public records, company filings, anything that might shed light on Thorne Innovations' true nature. It was a long shot, but I was desperate. The next few days were a blur of late nights, fueled by strong coffee and a burning desire for the truth. We dug through corporate registries, looked up property deeds, and searched for any legal disputes involving Julian or his company. Most of it was dead ends, a labyrinth of legitimate-looking paperwork that revealed nothing out of the ordinary. But then, Chloe found something. A small, almost insignificant detail buried deep within a financial filing for Thorn Innovations. A recent loan, a substantial one, secured against an asset that didn't seem to exist. Or rather, an asset that Julian had never mentioned owning. A property in a small, coastal town, hundreds of miles away from our city. A property he had purchased just 6 months ago. My heart pounded in my chest. 6 months ago. That was around the time he'd proposed to me in Bali. That was around the time he'd started talking about the game-changer investment and the cottage by the lake. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. The cottage. The dream home. It wasn't for us. It was for Anastasia. The realization hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. He hadn't just been having an affair, he'd been building a life with her, a life he'd promised me. He'd been planning their future, while simultaneously planning ours. The depth of his deception was truly unfathomable. The betrayal was so profound, so meticulously crafted, that it left me breathless. This wasn't just a fling, this was a complete, calculated double life. And I, the unwitting fiancé, had been living in a fantasy, a carefully constructed illusion, while he built his real life with someone else. The anger that had been simmering within me now erupted into a full-blown inferno. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. This was about justice. And I was going to make sure he paid for every single lie. The discovery of the coastal property, purchased just 6 months prior, felt like the final, crushing blow. It wasn't just a house, it was the physical manifestation of Julian's betrayal, a tangible monument to his double life. He had spoken of a cottage by the lake for us, a future we would build together, a tranquil escape from the city's hustle. He had even shown me design sketches, asked for my input on the layout of my dream studio, meticulously crafting a shared vision that now felt like a cruel, elaborate joke. The property Chloe found was not a cottage by a lake, it was a modern, sleek beach house, situated on a secluded stretch of coastline, far from the city. The images she managed to unearth from a local real estate listing, now archived, showed a minimalist design, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, and a sprawling deck perfect for entertaining. It was beautiful, undeniably so, in a way that twisted the knife deeper into my heart. This was the life he was building, not with me, but with Anastasia. The thought was a venomous bite, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile the Julian who had proposed to me on that moonlit beach in Bali, his voice thick with emotion, telling me I was his everything, with the Julian who had simultaneously been purchasing a secret love nest with another woman. The sheer audacity, the cold calculation of it all, was breathtaking. He was a master of deception, a chameleon who could effortlessly switch between roles, playing the devoted fiancé to me, and the committed partner to her. The realization left me feeling utterly hollowed out, as if my entire existence had been a carefully orchestrated performance for his benefit. Chloe, seeing the raw pain etched on my face, gently closed my laptop. "Alara," she said, her voice soft but firm, "he's not worth another tear. He's a con artist, pure and simple. And we're going to expose him." Her words, though a comfort, also fueled the burning anger within me. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was enraged. Enraged at the years I had wasted, the dreams I had invested, the trust one had so freely given to a man who had systematically dismantled my reality. The anger was a powerful, cleansing force, pushing aside the grief and self-pity. I would not let him get away with this. I would not be another one of his victims. The investment summit, where Julian and Anastasia were scheduled to speak, was just a week away. It was the perfect stage, the ideal opportunity to expose him. But how? How could I, a graphic designer with no experience in public confrontations, expose a master manipulator on his own turf, in front of his peers and potential investors? The task felt daunting, almost impossible. But I was determined. We started brainstorming, throwing out ideas, some wild, some strategic. Chloe suggested hiring a private investigator, but I dismissed it. It would take too long, and I wanted to be the one to expose him, to reclaim my narrative. I wanted to look him in the eye as his world crumbled. Then, an idea sparked, a dangerous, exhilarating thought that sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. My design skills. My ability to create visual narratives, to distill complex information into compelling, impactful imagery. Could I use that? Could I create something that would expose him, subtly but undeniably, without resorting to a public screaming match? The idea began to take shape in my mind. A risky but potentially devastating plan. The next few days were a whirlwind of clandestine activity. I told Julian I was going out of town for a family emergency, a lie that felt sickeningly familiar, but necessary. He bought it, of course, too preoccupied with his own machinations to notice the subtle shift in my demeanor, the cold glint in my eyes. While he was busy preparing for his grand performance at the summit, I was busy preparing for his downfall. Chloe became my co-conspirator, her research skills invaluable. We gathered every piece of evidence, the LinkedIn profile, the article about the joint panel, the property records, even old social media posts that hinted at Anastasia's presence in his life long before I came into the picture. Each piece was a thread in the intricate tapestry of his deception. My plan was risky, audacious, and required meticulous timing. The summit was a high-profile event, attended by influential investors, media, and industry leaders. Julian would be in his element, basking in the spotlight, presenting his innovative new investment model with Anastasia by his side. My goal was to introduce a subtle, undeniable piece of information into the public domain during his presentation, something that would trigger a ripple effect, forcing his lies to unravel on their own. I couldn't directly confront him, he would simply deny, deflect, and gaslight. I needed to plant a seed of doubt, a question mark that would grow into a full-blown investigation. My mind raced, considering various options. A subtle change to his presentation slides? Too difficult to implement without being caught. A planted question from the audience? Too risky, and easily dismissed. Then, the perfect idea hit me, inspired by my own profession. I would create a digital artifact, a piece of visual information that would be seemingly innocuous, but for those who knew where to look, for those who had the context, it would be a bombshell. It would be a subtle, almost imperceptible detail, but once seen, it couldn't be unseen. It would be a digital whisper that would grow into a roar. The summit was held at the city's most prestigious convention center, a sprawling glass and steel structure that hummed with the energy of ambition and capital. I arrived early, dressed in a sharp, professional suit, blending seamlessly into the crowd of attendees. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of my resolve. I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. This was it. The moment of truth. Julian was already there, holding court in the main hall, surrounded by a cluster of eager investors. Anastasia was by his side, her emerald dress from the gala replaced by a sleek, tailored pantsuit. They looked every inch the power couple, radiating confidence and success. A bitter laugh almost escaped me. The irony was almost too much to bear. I found a seat in the back of the main auditorium, my laptop bag clutched tightly in my lap. Inside, a USB drive held the key to Julian's undoing. My hands were clammy, my palms sweating, but my resolve remained unshaken. I watched as Julian and Anastasia took the stage, the spotlights illuminating their perfectly composed faces. Julian began his presentation, his voice smooth and confident, weaving a narrative of innovation, growth, and unparalleled financial returns. He spoke of disrupting the market, of next-generation solutions, of a future where his vision would transform the industry. And then, it was Anastasia's turn. She spoke eloquently, her voice clear and authoritative, detailing the financial projections, the investment opportunities, the promise of astronomical returns. The audience was captivated, nodding along, their eyes gleaming with avarice. My moment was approaching. I took a deep breath, steadying my trembling hands. This was it. The culmination of weeks of pain, anger, and meticulous planning. I was about to expose the truth, not just for myself, but for every other person he had deceived, every other life he had carelessly trampled upon. The air in the auditorium was thick with anticipation, the hum of the projector a rhythmic beat against the frantic pounding of my heart. I was ready. The moment Anastasia clicked to the next slide, a collective murmur rippled through the audience. It was a complex infographic detailing projected returns and market growth, all very standard for an investment summit. But nestled subtly within the intricate web of data, almost imperceptible unless you knew what you were looking for, was a small, stylized icon. It was a tiny, elegant rendering of a beach house, the exact one from the archived real estate listing Chloe had found, complete with a small, almost hidden, A and J intertwined in the corner of the roofline. It was my subtle, damning signature. The image flashed on the giant screen for only a few seconds before Anastasia moved on to the next slide, but it was enough. For anyone who had seen the real estate listing, for anyone who knew about the property, it was a direct, undeniable link. And for those who didn't, it was just a decorative, seemingly innocuous element, easily dismissed. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of my resolve. I watched Julian's face, searching for any flicker of recognition, any sign that he had noticed the subtle sabotage. His expression remained perfectly composed, a practiced smile on his lips as he nodded along to Anastasia's presentation. He hadn't seen it. Or if he had, he was a master at concealing his reaction. The thought sent a jolt of perverse satisfaction through me. The seed had been planted. Now, I just had to wait for it to grow. The rest of the presentation passed in a blur. My focus was no longer on Julian or Anastasia, but on the subtle reactions of the audience. I watched as a few people in the front rows, particularly those who looked like seasoned investors, leaned in, their brows furrowed, their eyes lingering on the screen for a fraction of a second longer than necessary when the infographic reappeared. A few even exchanged quick, whispered glances. It was a tiny ripple, but it was there. The questions began during the Q&A session. Most were standard, probing questions about financial models and market risks. But then, a man in the third row, a well-known financial journalist, raised his hand. "Mr. Thorne, Ms. Petrova," he began, his voice calm and measured, "your presentation is certainly compelling. I'm curious, however, about the unique branding element on slide 17. The stylized beach house icon. Is that a new corporate logo, or does it hold some other significance?" My breath hitched. He'd seen it. Someone had seen it. Julian's smile faltered for a split second, a barely perceptible tremor around his lips. Anastasia, however, was quicker. "Ah, yes," she said, her voice smooth and unruffled, "that's a little artistic flourish our design team added. It's meant to symbolize the dream of financial freedom, the lifestyle our investments can help our clients achieve. A touch of aspirational branding, if you will." She gave a practiced, confident smile. It was a plausible explanation, a quick save. But the journalist wasn't satisfied. "Interesting," he said, a hint of skepticism in his voice. "Because I seem to recall a very similar property, a beach house in, coastal town name, that was recently purchased by a shell corporation linked to Thorne Innovations. Is there any connection between that property and this aspirational branding?" The air in the auditorium suddenly felt charged, thick with unspoken tension. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Julian's face, which had been so perfectly composed just moments before, now drained of all color. His eyes darted to Anastasia, a silent, panicked plea passing between them. Anastasia, for the first time, looked genuinely flustered. Her confident smile vanished, replaced by a tight, almost grimace. I'm not sure what you're referring to," she stammered, her voice losing its smooth composure. "Thorne Innovations has many, diverse assets. I'm not privy to every single property acquisition." It was a weak defense, and everyone in the room knew it. The journalist pressed on, relentless. "Perhaps," he said, his voice rising slightly, "you could clarify the nature of your collaborative efforts, Ms. Petrova." Given the recent rumors surrounding Sterling Capital's financial stability and Mr. Thorne's rather opaque business dealings, some might find the timing of this joint venture suspicious. The word rumors hung in the air, a poisonous cloud. Julian, who had been frozen in place, suddenly sprang to life, his voice booming, laced with a forced indignation. "This is outrageous," he exclaimed, his face now a mottled red. "These are baseless accusations. Our financial dealings are completely above board, and Sterling Capital is a reputable firm. This journalist is clearly trying to sensationalize a perfectly legitimate business partnership." He was trying to gaslight the entire room, to discredit the journalist, to regain control of the narrative. But it was too late. The seed had been planted. The questions had been asked. And the whispers had already begun. The room erupted into a cacophony of murmurs and whispers. People were pulling out their phones, no doubt searching for information, confirming the journalist's claims. Julian's perfect facade had cracked, revealing the panicked, desperate man beneath. Anastasia, pale and visibly shaken, tried to interject, but her voice was drowned out by the rising tide of confusion and suspicion. I sat in the back, a silent observer, a strange mix of triumph and profound sadness washing over me. The revenge was sweet, undeniably so, but it came at a heavy cost. The man I had loved, the future I had envisioned, was now irrevocably shattered, exposed as a cruel, elaborate lie. The unraveling was complete. And the fallout was just beginning. The auditorium, once a bastion of polished professionalism, had devolved into a chaotic hum of whispers and the frantic tapping of keyboards on phones. Julian, his face a mask of furious desperation, was attempting to regain control, his voice rising above the din, but his words were losing their power, swallowed by the rising tide of suspicion. Anastasia, beside him, looked like a deer caught in headlights, her carefully constructed composure completely shattered. The journalist, a smug look of satisfaction on his face, simply sat back, letting the chaos unfold, his mission accomplished. I watched, a detached observer, as the edifice of Julian's carefully constructed life began to crumble before my eyes. It wasn't the dramatic, screaming confrontation I had sometimes fantasized about, but it was far more devastating. It was a public, undeniable exposure, triggered by a subtle, almost invisible detail, and amplified by the relentless scrutiny of the media. The beauty of it, in a twisted way, was its inevitability. Once the first crack appeared, the entire structure was destined to collapse. I slipped out of the auditorium amidst the confusion, unnoticed by the frantic crowd. The cool air of the convention center hallway was a welcome relief, a stark contrast to the suffocating tension I had just left behind. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was Chloe. "Did you see that?" Her voice was a breathless whisper, tinged with a mix of shock and exhilaration. "He's toast, Alara. Absolutely toast." A small, bitter smile touched my lips. "I know," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. "I was there. We agreed to meet at our usual coffee shop, a quiet, unassuming place that felt like a sanctuary after the public spectacle." As I walked, the initial surge of adrenaline began to recede, replaced by a profound sense of exhaustion. The triumph I had felt moments ago was now tinged with a deep, aching sadness. The man I had loved, the man I had built my life around, was a fraud. And the realization, though confirmed, was still a heavy burden. Over coffee, Chloe and I pieced together the immediate aftermath. News of the journalist's questions had spread like wildfire. Social media was already abuzz with speculation, and financial news outlets were scrambling to confirm the rumors about Sterling Capital and Thorne Innovations. The aspirational branding beach house was already being dissected, its subtle detail now a glaring red flag. "You were brilliant, Alara," Chloe said, stirring her latte. "That little icon was genius." It was just enough to spark the questions without giving him a direct target to deny. I just nodded, feeling too drained to articulate the complex swirl of emotions within me. The public humiliation of Julian was satisfying, yes, but it didn't erase the years of gaslighting, the emotional abuse, the profound betrayal. It didn't heal the wounds he had inflicted. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and frantic texts. My own phone, which had been eerily silent for weeks as Julian subtly isolated me, now buzzed constantly. Friends, family, even distant acquaintances were reaching out, asking if I was okay, offering support, expressing shock and outrage. My parents, who had been so enamored with Julian, were devastated. My mother called me, her voice thick with tears, apologizing profusely for not seeing the signs, for encouraging the relationship. "We just wanted you to be happy, sweetheart," she'd choked out. "He seemed so perfect." I reassured her, telling her it wasn't her fault, that Julian was a master manipulator. But a part of me still felt the sting of their earlier approval, a reminder of how deeply I had been fooled. The financial entanglement Julian had woven around me also began to unravel. He had convinced me to invest a significant portion of my savings into Thorn Innovations, promising astronomical returns. He'd even persuaded me to take out a small loan against my apartment, assuring me it was a no-risk, high-yield opportunity that would set us up for life. Now, with the company's reputation in tatters and rumors of financial impropriety swirling, my investments were likely worthless, and the loan was a ticking time bomb. The thought sent a fresh wave of panic through me. It wasn't just my heart that was broken, my financial security was also in jeopardy. Julian, predictably, tried to contact me. His calls and texts started immediately after the summit, a frantic barrage of apologies, pleas, and, inevitably, more gaslighting. "Alara, you have to understand, it's all a misunderstanding. That journalist is a hack. They're trying to ruin me. Please, you know me, you know I would never hurt you. This is all just a smear campaign." His words were a sickening echo of the past, a desperate attempt to manipulate me back into his orbit. I ignored every single one. Chloe had advised me to block him, to cut off all contact, and for once, I listened without hesitation. I didn't want to hear his lies, his excuses, his desperate attempts to salvage his crumbling empire. I wanted him out of my life, completely and irrevocably. The public fallout for Julian was swift and brutal. Investors pulled out, his reputation was in tatters, and the media, sensing a juicy scandal, dug deeper, unearthing more and more of his fraudulent dealings. The beach house, the secret property, was headline news. Anastasia Petrova, too, faced public scrutiny, her name now inextricably linked to Julian's downfall. I saw a fleeting news report of her being questioned by authorities, her face grim, her once confident demeanor replaced by a look of fear and resignation. It was a small comfort, knowing that she, too, was facing the consequences of her involvement. But the comfort was fleeting. The pain of betrayal, the years of wasted love and trust, still gnawed at me. The unraveling was complete, but the healing was a long, arduous journey that had only just begun. I felt like a raw nerve, exposed to the elements, every sound, every sight, every memory of fresh assault on my fragile peace. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, filled with ghosts of a life that never truly existed. I knew I needed to start picking up the pieces, but the sheer weight of it all felt insurmountable. The apartment, once a sanctuary filled with the warmth of shared laughter and quiet intimacy, now felt like a museum of a life that never truly existed. Every object, from the mismatched coffee mugs we'd bought on a weekend trip to the abstract painting he'd helped me hang in the living room, felt like a relic of a carefully constructed lie. I couldn't bear to look at them, couldn't bear to be in the space that had witnessed so much deception. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken memories, and the silence, once comforting, now screamed with the absence of his voice. His presence, his elaborate charade. I spent most of my days curled on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, staring blankly at the wall, the world outside a distant, muffled hum. My appetite had vanished, replaced by a constant knot of nausea in my stomach. Sleep offered no escape, only restless nights filled with fragmented nightmares of betrayal and humiliation. My creative energy, usually a vibrant, flowing river, had dried up completely, leaving me creatively barren. My clients were calling, emails piling up, but I couldn't bring myself to answer, to engage with the world. I felt utterly, completely depleted. Chloe, however, refused to let me wallow. She was a constant, unwavering presence, a lifeline in the swirling chaos of my grief. She brought me food, forced me to take walks, and, most importantly, listened without judgment. She'd sit with me for hours, letting me talk, letting me cry, letting me rage. "It's okay to feel this, Alara," she'd say, her voice soft. "It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. You've been through something traumatic." Her validation was a balm, slowly, painstakingly, helping me to acknowledge the depth of the emotional abuse I had endured. It wasn't just a breakup, it was a psychological assault, a systematic dismantling of my reality. The gaslighting, the constant questioning of my own memory and sanity, had left deep scars. I'd started to believe I was crazy, that I was overreacting, that I was the problem. Now, with Chloe's unwavering support, I began to see the truth. Julian was the problem. He was the manipulator, the liar, the architect of his own downfall. One afternoon, as I sat staring blankly at my laptop, Chloe gently nudged it open. "We need to deal with the financial stuff, Alara," she said, her voice firm but kind. "It's not going to go away on its own." The thought of confronting the financial mess Julian had created filled me with dread, but I knew she was right. We started by contacting my bank about the loan. The process was agonizing, filled with endless paperwork and frustrating phone calls. The bank, seeing the public scandal surrounding Thorn Innovations, was less than sympathetic. My investments, as I had feared, were indeed worthless. The loan, however, was still very much real. It was a crushing blow, a tangible reminder of Julian's deceit and my own financial vulnerability. But facing it, head-on, was also strangely empowering. It was a step towards reclaiming control, towards disentangling myself from his toxic web. Chloe, ever resourceful, also helped me reach out to a lawyer specializing in financial fraud. The initial consultation was a sobering experience. The lawyer explained the complexities of pursuing a case against Julian, the time, the expense, the uncertainty of recovery. "He's a slippery one, Ms. Vance," the lawyer had said, referring to Julian. "He's clearly been operating on the fringes of legality for a while. It's going to be an uphill battle." The thought of a long, drawn-out legal battle was exhausting, but the idea of letting him get away with it was even more so. I decided to pursue it, if only to send a message that he couldn't simply defraud people and walk away unscathed. The legal process, however, was slow, tedious, and emotionally draining. It forced me to revisit every painful detail of Julian's deception, to recount the lies, to relive the betrayal. Each document I signed, each question I answered, was a fresh wound, but also a step towards closure. As the weeks turned into months, the immediate shock began to fade, replaced by a slow, arduous process of healing. I started going back to work, tentatively at first, then with renewed focus. My design work, once a source of comfort, now became a therapeutic outlet, a way to channel my emotions into something productive. I started with small projects, then gradually took on more challenging ones, finding a quiet satisfaction in the act of creation. My clients, understanding and supportive, were patient, allowing me the space I needed to recover. I also started reconnecting with other friends, people Julian had subtly pushed away. Dinners, movie nights, long walks in the park, these simple acts of connection felt incredibly restorative. I realized how much I had isolated myself, how much of my life had revolved around Julian and his carefully constructed world. Reclaiming my social life, my friendships, felt like reclaiming a part of myself that had been lost. The public fallout for Julian continued to unfold. News reports detailed the collapse of Thorn Innovations, the investigations into his fraudulent dealings, and the mounting lawsuits from disgruntled investors. Anastasia Petrova, too, faced legal consequences, though her role seemed to be more one of complicity than direct initiation. I saw a news photo of Julian, his once impeccable suit now rumpled, his face gaunt and drawn, being escorted into a courthouse. He looked nothing like the charismatic, confident man who had once charmed me, nothing like the man who had effortlessly commanded a room full of powerful investors. He looked small, defeated, stripped of his carefully constructed facade. A strange mix of emotions washed over me, a flicker of satisfaction, yes, but also a profound sense of pity. He had destroyed so much, not just for me, but for countless others, all for the sake of his own ego and insatiable greed. The financial and legal battles were far from over, but the public exposure had irrevocably shattered his reputation and his carefully constructed world. He was no longer the charming, successful Julian Thorne, he was a disgraced con artist, his name synonymous with fraud and deception. And in a strange way, that was a form of justice. It wouldn't bring back the years I had lost, or the trust he had so carelessly broken, but it was a testament to the fact that lies, no matter how meticulously crafted, eventually unravel. And I, Alara, the quiet graphic designer, had played a part in that unraveling. And that, in itself, was a powerful, undeniable truth. As the legal proceedings against Julian dragged on, a new kind of ripple effect began to emerge. The media coverage, initially focused on his financial misdeeds, started to delve deeper into the psychological aspects of his manipulation. Articles appeared discussing gaslighting, narcissistic abuse, and the insidious ways in which charismatic individuals can exploit the trust of others. My story, though never explicitly named, became a cautionary tale, a blueprint for recognizing the red flags I had so stubbornly ignored. It was a strange and unexpected turn, to see my personal trauma dissected and analyzed in the public sphere, but it also brought a peculiar sense of validation. Other victims, emboldened by the public exposure, began to come forward. Not just women he had romanced and defrauded, but also business associates he had swindled, employees he had exploited, and even distant family members he had manipulated for financial gain. Each new story was a sickening echo of my own, a testament to the sheer scale of his deception. It was a dark tapestry woven with countless threads of lies, and Julian was at its center, the master weaver. I found myself in an unexpected role, a reluctant confidant. People, many of whom I didn't know, started reaching out to me through mutual friends, through social media, even through my lawyer. They wanted to share their stories, to ask for advice, to find solace in shared experience. It was overwhelming at first, a constant reminder of the pain I was trying to heal from. But then, something shifted. As I listened to their stories, as I shared my own, I realized that my experience, however painful, could be a source of strength for others. I wasn't just a victim, I was a survivor. And my voice, once silenced by Julian's gaslighting, could now be a beacon for those still trapped in similar webs of deceit. I started a small, anonymous online support group, a safe space for people to share their experiences with manipulative partners. It grew quickly, a testament to the pervasive nature of such abuse. We shared resources, coping mechanisms, and, most importantly, a sense of community. It was a quiet form of retribution, a way to counteract Julian's destructive legacy by building something positive, something healing. Professionally, the experience, though traumatic, had also sharpened my focus. My design work, which had once been a means to an end, now felt imbued with a deeper purpose. I started taking on projects that resonated with my newfound passion for truth and transparency. I designed infographics for nonprofits raising awareness about financial scams, created visual campaigns for organizations supporting victims of domestic abuse, and even collaborated with a journalist on a series of illustrations for an article about online manipulation. It was a way to channel my pain into something meaningful, to use my skills to help prevent others from falling victim to the same kind of deception I had endured. My creative output soared, fueled by a renewed sense of purpose and a burning desire to make a difference. The financial repercussions of Julian's actions were still a heavy burden. The loan on my apartment was a constant source of stress, and the legal fees were mounting. But I was determined not to let it break me. I took on extra freelance work, tightened my budget, and explored every avenue for financial recovery. It was a slow, arduous climb, but with each small step, I felt a renewed sense of control over my own life. Julian, meanwhile, had faded from the public eye, his name now synonymous with scandal rather than success. The last I heard, he was facing multiple lawsuits and a potential criminal investigation. His once grand penthouse apartment had been seized, his assets frozen. The empire he had so meticulously built on a foundation of lies had crumbled completely. Anastasia Petrova, too, had disappeared from the public sphere. Her LinkedIn profile was gone, her professional reputation irrevocably damaged. I sometimes wondered if she, too, was a victim in her own way, caught in Julian's web of deceit, or if she was a willing accomplice. The answer didn't really matter anymore. My focus was on my own healing, on rebuilding my own life, on finding strength in the wreckage he had left behind. The anger, which had once burned so fiercely, had slowly transformed into a quiet resolve. I didn't want revenge in the traditional sense, I wanted justice, and I wanted to ensure that others were spared the pain I had endured. And in my own way, through my work and my advocacy, I was achieving that. The scars remained, a permanent reminder of the lessons learned, but they no longer defined me. They were a testament to my resilience, to my ability to rise from the ashes, stronger and wiser than before. The journey was far from over, but I was no longer lost. I was on a path of healing, of purpose, and of quiet, unwavering strength. The online support group I'd started, initially a small, tentative gathering of strangers, had blossomed into a vibrant, interconnected community. We called ourselves the Unravelers, a nod to the way our own truths had been exposed, but also to our collective mission to unravel the patterns of manipulation. We shared stories, celebrated small victories, and offered a safe haven for those navigating the treacherous waters of emotional recovery. It was a powerful testament to the human spirit's capacity for resilience and connection, even in the face of profound betrayal. I found myself spending hours each week moderating discussions, sharing resources, and offering words of encouragement. It was a demanding role, but also deeply fulfilling. It allowed me to transform my pain into purpose, to use my experience to light the way for others who were still stumbling in the darkness. My own emotional intelligence, once dulled by Julian's gaslighting, had sharpened considerably. I could now identify manipulative tactics with an almost uncanny precision, not just in others' stories, but also in my own past interactions. It was a painful but necessary process of re-education, of unlearning the toxic patterns he had ingrained in me. My professional life continued to flourish. The graphic design projects I took on became increasingly impactful, reflecting my commitment to social causes and transparency. I designed a series of educational posters for a university psychology department, illustrating the subtle signs of gaslighting. I created a powerful visual campaign for a nonprofit advocating for financial literacy. Using my own experience as a cautionary tale, anonymously, of course. My work was no longer just about aesthetics, it was about communication, about empowerment, about shedding light on hidden truths. The financial strain, while still present, felt less overwhelming. I had managed to restructure the loan on my apartment, and through diligent freelance work and careful budgeting, I was slowly but surely rebuilding my savings. The legal battle against Julian was still ongoing, a slow, grinding process, but I had a strong legal team, and the mounting evidence against him made me cautiously optimistic. The thought of recovering some of my lost investments, while appealing, was no longer my primary motivation. My true victory lay in reclaiming my life, my autonomy, and my peace of mind. Julian, for all his attempts to disappear, remained a spectral presence in the periphery of my life, a constant reminder of the past, but one that no longer held power over me. News reports, though less frequent, still occasionally surfaced, detailing his continued legal woes, the unraveling of his remaining assets, and the growing list of people he had defrauded. He was a pariah, his name synonymous with deceit and ruin. The last I heard, he was facing criminal charges, a consequence that felt both inevitable and just. Anastasia Petrova, too, had vanished from the public eye. I sometimes wondered about her fate, whether she was truly a victim or a willing participant in his schemes. But the question no longer consumed me. My focus was on my own journey, on the path of healing and rebuilding. I had learned to trust my instincts again, to listen to the quiet whispers of doubt that Julian had so effectively silenced. I had learned to value genuine connection, to cherish the unwavering support of friends like Chloe, and to recognize the true meaning of love, not as a grand, performative gesture, but as a quiet, consistent act of respect, honesty, and mutual growth. The scars remained, of course. The memory of the betrayal, the humiliation, the years of gaslighting, they were etched into my psyche, a permanent reminder of the lessons learned. But they were no longer open wounds. They were faded marks, a testament to my resilience, to the strength I had found within myself. I was no longer the naive, trusting Alara who had been so easily swept off her feet. I was stronger, wiser, more discerning. I had faced the darkness, navigated the wreckage, and emerged on the other side, not unscathed, but unbroken. My apartment, once a painful reminder of a shattered dream, now felt like a true home, a sanctuary filled with my own art, my own books, my own quiet peace. I had repainted the walls, rearranged the furniture, and slowly, painstakingly, filled it with objects that reflected my true self, not the curated version Julian had preferred. The framed photo of us from Bali was gone, replaced by a vibrant abstract piece I had painted myself, a riot of colors that symbolized resilience and renewal. Life was not perfect, and the journey of healing was ongoing. There were still moments of sadness, of anger, of lingering doubt. But they were fleeting, overshadowed by a profound sense of gratitude for the lessons learned, for the strength discovered, and for the genuine connections I had forged. I was building a new life, brick by painful brick, a life rooted in authenticity, self-respect, and unwavering truth. Julian's legacy was one of ruin and deceit. My legacy, I hoped, would be one of resilience, of healing, and of empowering others to find their own truth. The chapter with Julian was closed, irrevocably. And the next chapter, filled with the promise of new beginnings and quiet strength, was just beginning to unfold. The quiet hum of the city outside my window, once a reminder of the life I had shared with him, now felt like a symphony of possibility, a gentle invitation to embrace the future, on my own terms. The air smelled of fresh rain and possibility, a clean, crisp scent that filled my lungs and invigorated my spirit. I was free. And that, in itself, was the greatest triumph of all.